Welcome to Pods with Posh and Paul, a podcast designed to inspire and challenge listeners through story, experience and insight. To face adversity, learn from suffering and discover how to embrace life with a heart filled with love and gratitude. We are so thrilled to have you journey with us and can't wait to share your stories. Join Sue O'Callaghan and Joanne Webb as we disrupt the theory that everyone has perfect lives.
Hi and thanks so much for listening. Joining us on this episode we have my beautiful and fabulous friend Jess. Jess and I have been friends for over a decade and it's such a pleasure to have her with us to share her story. Jess married her childhood sweetheart after 8 blissful, fun and extremely happy years of dating. They had a dream wedding and went off on their romantic honeymoon. Everything seemed rosy until they returned home, when things rapidly changed. Jess couldn't understand what was wrong. Why this once loving and attentive man was now distant, cold and evasive. She asked questions and searched for answers, yet she was always dismissed or ignored. Jess knew she couldn't accept this as her life, and her intuition screamed at her to leave. Their marriage lasted only 8 short weeks. Jess did a lot of soul searching and started to rebuild her life, to discover then that her husband was gay and was in a relationship with one of his friends. This brought back all of the initial hurt, further confusion and more profound loss. Stay tuned to hear Jess's story of lost dreams, unimaginable hurt, courage, kindness, compassion, tenacity, self-care and gratitude. We are so pleased to welcome Jessica Thompson.
Jess, welcome to the podcast. Lovely to have you with us today.
Thank you. I'm Jess for everyone who's listening.
Right, Jess, so how old are you now?
So I'm 26 and I'm turning 27 next week.
And you have already been married and divorced, that's correct, isn't it?
Yes, it is correct, yes.
Okay, so for our listeners, tell us a little bit about the backstory. So how long ago did you get divorced first?
So officially divorced as of the 5th of October last year.
And how long did your marriage actually last?
Well, on paper, nearly 2 years, but together actually for about 8 weeks or 9 weeks, yeah.
So from the day you got married till the day you separated, there was 8 or 9 weeks?
Yeah, about 9 weeks, yeah.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about your relationship before you broke up.
Okay, so we were friends since we were about 10 years old, and we are 10 or 11, I think, and then we'd kind of just always been really good friends, and then I think we got together when we were about 18. We'd been in the same kind of group of friends all along, and then moved to London together, stayed there for a year, came back, did all the things that you do, go travelling together, would just do everything together really. And then probably he asked me to marry him after we'd been together for about 6 years, I think, or maybe just a bit less. And then it was all great. He was a great boyfriend, really, really caring, always really looked out for me, was always just really nice, and we always got along. We agreed about almost everything and it was really good. So we got engaged and then we got married probably about 2 years after that.
That was
November 2017.
Okay. And you were definitely each other's best friend, right?
Oh yeah, completely. Like we used to spend all our time together, and it was just really easy. Like it wasn't hard work. We just kind of all just got on with it, and we always just like had a great time together.
And what a history to share. To know each other since the age of 10. You obviously knew everything about each other's families.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, really all intertwined. Like our families were great friends, his parents, my parents, and it all just, everyone else we also hung around with in the same group. All their parents were kind of friends with each other as well. So
Jess, Jo knows your story and she knows you, but I don't. So just for our listeners and for me, you grew up in New Zealand and then you went to live in England for a bit, come back.
Yeah.
So then you moved to England with him when you were engaged?
Yep. So we moved to England the first time when we were 18 for a year, and then we came back for about 4 years, and then we moved there again after we got engaged, and we lived there for about 2 years together, or just under 2 years maybe together.
But then, and you talk about your relationship, and I know, as I know you, I knew him as well, and I know you were best friends and you were always a delight to be around. It was amazing. But equally, as individuals, considering you got together so young and you're still so young, you were both quite level-headed individuals who were coming into the relationship
you both seem like happy individuals. You didn't need something from each other, did you?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Like, we were both, even, like, it wasn't all about relying on one person more than the other. Like, it was all quite equal, and we kind of both brought good things to each other's lives, I guess you could say.
Whereas lots of people get together, they're very needy, or they develop a codependent relationship quite young.
Yeah, so, and it wasn't like that for us.
And so the two of you were these two level-headed people coming together, but you also had like your own individual lives as well. You know, I know you're both flight attendants, you were travelling the world, so you're happy to be apart, really happy to be together. So from anybody else, because I know you got married quite young, you got engaged quite young, you were together from 18, and you know, they'll have the naysayers going, oh, you know, they were too young to get together, but actually from everybody else, it did actually look like you had the perfect relationship, and that's how you felt.
Well, yes, yeah, definitely. I couldn't agree more. I thought I was the luckiest girl in the world
So clearly there's a cliffhanger in here.
Yeah.
And I'm dying to know what it is.
So basically we got married, and then almost immediately after we got back from our honeymoon, he started something changed, and I couldn't really put my finger on exactly what it was, but just something changed within him. He kind of stopped coming home, stopped talking to me, stopped communicating with me at all. Just ignored me, was always out, always too busy, just didn't want to kind of be involved with me at all. And he was always out drinking loads and kind of things like, we did all these things together, and we were always, you know, had fun together. But then all of a sudden it was like I was irrelevant in his life.
So you went on your honeymoon, you got married here in New Zealand.
Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful day. Everybody looked amazing, all your families are together, your friends there.
Yeah.
You go on honeymoon. Was there any inclination on your honeymoon or on the wedding day that anything was amiss?
No, not. I think I was nervous on the wedding day, but I mean I think that's quite normal to be nervous. Like, I wouldn't have done it if I didn't want to do it, or if I felt something was amiss. And then the honeymoon was good. We had a really great time. We went to Hawaii, and we've been to Hawaii a few times together, and it was lovely. So yeah, it was just quite a shock.
Things started to change between you. He was going out more without you.
Yeah.
Was it with a set of friends you'd met before, or you didn't know anything about his life or what was going on?
So I knew some of the friends, and it was a set of friends, but then mainly one guy specifically who he'd befriended probably about 6 months before we got married, maybe about 6 months. Yeah, they were kind of together, you know, doing things a lot with their group of friends, and sometimes I'd be invited, sometimes I wasn't, and then it just became more of a thing that I wasn't invited.
And I think as women, we're naturally very intuitive people, aren't we?
Yeah.
And we know something's up. We know we can't put our finger on it, and we start inquiring, or we start becoming oversensitive, or we start trying to be a better person ourselves, or change ourselves. So what was that period like for you? Were you suspicious anything was going on, or were you just in a place that you were a bit confused?
Not initially. I was just more confused. I kind of went into thinking maybe, you know, we are quite young, we got married young, like maybe it's kind of all just a bit much, and he just needs a bit of time. But then, as you say, you start thinking, well, what can I do to make myself better? How can I deal with this in a better way so that I can maybe help him deal with it in a better way?
And were you having conversations at that time in the marriage about what was happening?
No, he wouldn't talk about it. He would ignore me if I asked about it, or he just would avoid it. Like the master of avoidance, basically, there would be no communication at all. And if I started arguing about it or talking about it, he would just push it away and just leave, go out, stop talking to me.
Which must have been quite different to where you've been in a relationship before, because if you've been together all those years, there must have been really good, healthy conversation between you.
Well, yeah, I think you need that healthy conversation, because me personally, I'm very much like, I'll keep going until I get an answer, because it's really hard when someone's giving you nothing and all you want is to be able to fix it or sort it out, or at least help them through it, because, you know, you've known this person for so long and you just want to be there to help them, and then there's just nothing you can do.
And so obviously communication is a huge thing that we promote as well on the podcast. So you're really trying to communicate, he's pulling back. So how did you deal with that yourself? Because that's almost like, to some people that may have been a rejection. I don't know, how were you feeling about it at the time?
Oh, rejected 100%. I was beside myself. I thought, I was thinking, what have I done? Maybe I'm insane. I became to think that it was normal that you got married and then people just do whatever they want. So I convinced myself that I was the naggy one. I was the one that was making him not want to be there. Him being out 4 nights a week or whatever, that was normal when you were married, and I should just leave him be because I don't want to push him any further away.
Because I assume the only critical turning point had been that you got married.
Well, yeah.
The only difference in your relationship was maybe that, well, then you settle down and do your own thing and that's how life becomes.
Yeah.
But that wasn't the truth, was it?
Well, no, not at all. So it just kind of became quite more regular, all of that. And there was a few instances where he lied to me about things and I'd caught him out on it. And it was just all of these things were happening that had never happened before.
And I gather when he lied to you, you knew straight away he was lying.
Well, you can just tell, can't you? You just know something's not right. It was just hard, really. So I guess in that period of time, I was desperate to sort it out. So I actually got some counselling and I wanted to do counselling with him. So I suggested it and he was like, yeah, great idea, like we should do this. I wanted to do some counselling with him. He wasn't really interested in, he wasn't forthcoming with it, but he was like, yeah, we'll do it to sort it out. So I actually ended up doing that all alone, the counselling.
Wow.
Yeah, so
Wow.
He didn't come to any of them, but then I was kind of trying to encourage him to see someone else by himself because maybe that would help him open up about whatever was going on for him, and it would have been easier, obviously, if I wasn't there. Mm-hmm. He then did, I think he did one session by himself, but then he never went back. But I was always kind of, instead of me trying to talk about it with him, I was more probing him to try and talk about it with someone else because I thought that might help. So I did, all the counselling. So I did 6 sessions by myself, and she kind of look at ways to kind of save the relationship, things I could do to try and talk to him. She gave me tips about how to deal with, like, people deal with things differently, and ways that I could maybe approach him that were going to suit the way he was reacting towards me.
Yeah, just gave you some technique.
Yeah, none of that really helped. I tried to do all that, so I just kind of had to draw a line in the sand and say, right, well, I'm done then if you're not giving me anything. And so that by now we'd kind of separated and we've been going through all these motions, so it probably would have been from February to, say, maybe May, and then I just said about the 25th of May, I think it was,
Probably
2018, I said, I just cannot do this anymore. And I just wrote him a big letter and I said, right, that's it, I'm not mad with you, but I also can't keep doing this because it's just too much. And then it was all fine, and he was really cut up about it, and was kind of coming back and forth with me, didn't really understand, and you could see that he was there was something really had him that he just obviously couldn't talk about. And then after that, we kind of just stayed friends because I'd known him for so many years, and I was genuinely very worried about him. I mean, he'd never been like this ever. And he was such a great guy, and you just saw him going down this terrible road of, you just didn't know what was wrong. So I did stay friends with him for quite a long time because I wanted to help him, be there for him. And I had family in England and he didn't have anyone. Apart, he had his friends or whatever, but it wasn't like a stable, it's not your family, is it, So then I stayed friends with him, and then about probably 9 months later, I got chatting to him one day, and he kind of just blurted out that he was actually seeing this guy who I had suspicions about.
Wow.
Yeah.
And when you left him, you came over to New Zealand for a month, didn't you, to spend some time with your family?
Yeah.
To give him a chance to kind of move out of the apartment that you had in London and things like that, give you some space. And I know you had several conversations with family and friends. Did you have any inclination that could have been the issue, that he was gay?
Well, no, I didn't think he was gay, to be honest with you. I thought maybe there was someone else, but then also in your head, I think I was so caught up, and he'd never do that to me. I thought, I knew that I guess it's a trust thing. I really genuinely believed he would never do something like that.
Isn't that interesting in a relationship when you're kind of, you have your intuition, don't you? There's intuition there, there's a suspicion there that there's something going on, you don't know what it is, but also you're in denial.
Yeah.
You don't want to think the worst of the person that you're with because you believe the things they've always said to you, you believe the reasons why you got married, you believe the fact you've been together for so long, and all the conversations you've had. So in that moment though, I mean, where were you at in that moment? Because you must have been in such shock. How did you respond?
Not very well, actually. So I guess the worst part about it was I was a bit upset with the way he'd chosen to just blurt it out. We were in a pub actually with one of our other friends, and I kind of just got up and just was like, oh my God, I've just got to go. And then I just walked off, and that was it.
Shock.
Yeah, I just couldn't believe it, really.
It's one of those stories that we all hear, don't we? But actually in the moment you can't imagine how you'd respond if that was you in that situation.
There's so many different dynamics that were going on as well. You got married, you were childhood sweethearts, then he literally has an entire personality change.
Yeah.
But when you step back and you look at that, it's amazing what guilt does to you as a person, isn't it? Yeah, he was obviously carrying around huge amount of guilt and shame over what he was doing, which, you know, and all them things are brought on, and he obviously had to work through that, but he was also in denial, wasn't he? And not being honest. Had he been honest with you right at the beginning, you probably would have stuck by him.
Yeah, I mean,
you loved him that much.
I mean, all I really wanted, if he'd just come to me at the beginning and said, this has happened, like I've, you know, kissed another guy or whatever had happened, and he'd just said this had happened right at the beginning, yeah, I would have been upset. But I mean, I was more sad that he had this huge thing going on for him, and he didn't want to share it with me, but also he was going through that by himself. I would have loved to have just supported him through it, mainly.
And I think what's remarkable about what you say is that so many of us instantly think about our own needs. Where am I in this situation with my hurt and pain? But clearly where you were at is that you loved him and you'd been with him for so long. You were best friends, almost like brother and sister, I imagine, the relationship you had.
Yeah.
And what you keep saying is that you were just concerned for him, you wanted to support him, which I think is remarkable, Jo, isn't it? It just shows where you're coming from as a person and what a healthy person you are as an individual, that you're actually thinking about his needs. But also, who was there supporting you in that time? Where did you turn?
A good group of friends in London, and initially, like when we broke up, I didn't really want to talk about it with anyone because I was quite embarrassed. I mean, you know, we just got married, had the best day of our lives and all that, and then all of a sudden I was single, upset about being single, and then kind of quite ashamed that this had all happened when we were supposed to be so happy.
So quickly as
yeah.
well.
So I kind of told them after it all happened, and then they were supporting me through the whole year. Friends here, family here, and just kind of talked about it. I mean, you've just got to be really open about what happened. And
so even though you were feeling slightly ashamed, obviously rejected, confused, we could probably go through many other emotions, but you still talk to people.
Yeah, I think initially I didn't. Probably there was definitely maybe a 2-month period where I just didn't talk to anyone, and I only talked to my sister. And she then kind of had to reach out and say, Jess isn't telling anyone, but I need some help with this. But then after you start talking about it and the counselling and everything, you become so much more open about it, and you realise that actually it's so much easier to deal with things when you actually just have someone to talk it through with.
Yeah, and that's one of our messages to our listeners, and I know it's really hard because you would have also been carrying a certain amount of shame with you, and the only way you can actually get rid of shame is to share it. And you know, Brené Brown is so big on that, isn't she? And she talks about shame is like a solo thing. If you can only have shame if you keep it to yourself, and as soon as you start sharing it, the shame starts to shed. And you know, that's why we try and encourage people to tell their stories.
Yeah, I think it's really good to encourage anyone to talk about anything, because even once you've just got it off your chest, it's just a whole weight gets lifted off your shoulders.
And sometimes people don't have to give you the solutions, do they?
No, just listen as well. And that's like, even if sometimes people, you'd be surprised how many people then turn around and be like, oh, well, actually, like, this has happened to me as well. Or, you know, like, people end up being able to add something that you might not have thought about that helps you through your tough time.
Absolutely.
And so where are you at in the relationship now? Have you managed to kind of rekindle a friendship out of it, or you have had to separate completely from even the friendship to protect yourself?
So I've just kind of stepped back a bit now, because after all the lies and the hurt, I mean, it just was a bit much. I just needed to just step back from it, because I would want to be his friend, but then at the same time I'm so hesitant about it, because in the back of my head I'm always going, oh, well, you obviously didn't mean that much to him for him to want to keep you in his life, so why should you? But it is hard, because I think I would love to still like have a friendship with him. We have such an intertwined friendship group, but it's just a difficult situation.
And that's one thing we always talk about on our podcast as well, is boundaries. What are healthy boundaries? And so in a situation like that, clearly where you've shared so much and you've been married, there needs to be boundaries to protect both of you, I guess, but more so you, because your heart's desire was to still be with him and be that friend. So how do you move on with healthy boundaries? And sometimes, you know, listeners will be coming from split relationships with all sorts of different backgrounds, and Joe and I have been in narcissistic relationships where you need strong boundaries, which sometimes means never seeing them again, or actually no email or text contact at all, which is hard. But
I think sometimes cutting it off, that gives you that breathing space, doesn't it? Because absolutely time to heal, and that's the biggest word, isn't it? And it's the most important word, because we start off by shedding the shame, shedding all the embarrassment, and only then, once we've accepted a situation, can then we begin to heal.
And working through the confusion as well, because obviously you're going through your mind, he said this, and when he was there, you're working it all out, and then obviously when the announcement comes that he's in a relationship with another man, you're going backwards in time probably in your head, aren't you?
Oh,
working
completely.
out when he wasn't in the house,
Yeah.
when he said something but did something else, and then it probably all starts to make sense. So we spend a lot of time in our heads, don't we, trying to work it out.
Putting the pieces together, absolutely.
And so you split up, how long ago?
2 years exactly,
2 years.
Nearly, yeah.
So you've come back to New Zealand to live here, or are you still living in England?
No, I still live in England.
Still
I'm
living
just here on holiday because I tried to come back for a month in February.
Well, I have to say you've chosen the best time to come back, because for those listeners in England, I know you've got Hurricane Kira, Hurricane Dennis, is it? And we've got heat waves going on, so you've got the best time to come back.
Exactly, yeah.
And sorry, you go, Joe.
No, I was going to say because obviously to get through what you've been through is a massive shock. You know, you're not only losing your husband, but you're losing your best friend. So you had to dig deep to get through it, which shows you have got huge strength and huge amount of resilience. But what else did you do for yourself? Because I know you went to counselling, you eventually talked to people, you know, you do have close friends and family, which is great, but what other tools did you use? What other things did you use to help build your resilience?
So probably just doing things for yourself. So just small things, even if it's not major, but just, I don't know, you start at the beginning, if it's like even just getting up out of bed or whatever, and then you just try and remember like that it's not going to be like this forever, and you just have to wake up the next day, and then it gradually gets easier, and then all of a sudden you're like a year down the line and you're like, oh my god, remember when you just thought you weren't even going to make it another year in life because it was just too much, and then you just think, here you are, and you're just existing, and you think how far you've come, and then you feel better about it.
That's quite critical, isn't it? Small steps.
Yeah.
That's what we say, because you know clearly where you want to be. You don't want to be in your head anymore thinking about them. You want to be healed. You want to be free to have another relationship, or move countries, do what you want to do. But actually, it's small steps, because you think just getting out of bed one day is so hard. But then, as you say, 3 months down the line, you can look back and say, gosh, 3 months ago I couldn't get out of bed, or I was struggling to get out of bed, and now I'm actually going for a small walk or a run in my day, and measuring the improvement and the progress that you're making.
And it's true what they say, time is a great healer, isn't it?
Yeah, and you know, people hate to hear it.
It's a horrible
but
thing
time
to hear.
heals everything. And I know it's so hard when people keep saying it to you and you're going, oh, I'm never going to feel better. But time literally heals everything. And just even from week to week, you start to feel slightly better.
Yeah.
And you just got to give it so much time. Like whether you fully get over it or not, you know, is unsure, but definitely time just is amazing.
Well, you'll always be a different person, because these things in life do change you. So it's never about bouncing back to who you were. It's about becoming a stronger, improved version of yourself, isn't it, really? And learning from what's happened and just taking the lessons with you.
Yeah.
But you also did, you know, you would have carried on. Did you carry on going to the gym? Did you carry on with your social life? Did you carry on with work? Did all of that help?
Yeah, definitely. So gymming I kind of laid off a bit initially, but then got back into it a lot. Work, with my job, because I am a flight attendant and I just turn my phone off when I go to work. So that was actually quite nice to just be able to go to work, turn my phone off and just be doing something. No one can contact you and you're just, you know, doing your job, and it's easy because you don't have to think about it and you don't have to worry about what's going on out in the world, and it's just kind of some time away from your own thoughts, which is nice.
So
That's
for
actually-
listeners
sorry.
that aren't in full-time work and they aren't busy, that's the worst thing, isn't it? When you've got time on your hands and you're in your thoughts, what would you say to listeners who've got time on their hands?
Talk to someone. Like, don't be ashamed to do counselling or anything like that. Also, journaling helps a lot. So I think Jo told me a lot about like writing. She got me doing a gratitude journal. So I was writing down like 3 things every day that was, you know, good things. And they might have been really, really small good things. But then if you like flick back through that, you think, oh yeah, that was a good day. This happened, la 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 la. And then it actually gets you on like more of a positive note and makes you start thinking in a different way, I think, as well, which is good. Also, just getting out of the house, going for a small walk, getting fresh air, exercising if you can, but even just walking is helpful.
And even joining a club or finding something that you're interested in and meeting people through an activity, a book club. So actually to get out the house, to do something where you've got a commitment once a week or twice a week, so you know that set time you're going to go out the house regardless of how you feel. And sometimes when we put ourselves in situations where there are other people and we don't feel like going, actually we come back feeling slightly more positive. Jo and I talk a lot about changing our thought patterns, don't we? From negative thoughts, I'm not worthy, I deserve this, or of course that was going to happen to me, into, you know, this is going to empower me to become a better person. You know, changing those thought patterns are really quite critical, but so hard to do when you're in that period of pain, isn't it? And it's just sometimes just sitting in the pain, because you can't accelerate time. And I think what you said is really interesting. People say that time heals, and you kind of think, I know time's going to heal, but right now I can't fast forward the clock by 2 years. And if I could, I would. I'd fast forward the clock and be 2 years ahead, but I can't. I'm in it right now, and it's so painful.
Yeah, I definitely think like for me, I kind of found myself saying yes more. So initially you're quite like introverted and just don't want anyone to be involved in what you're feeling. But then after a few months, I started saying yes to loads more things. I was going to all sorts of kind of festivals, gigs, different exhibitions, things that I wouldn't have not necessarily not done before, but didn't make time for. And then when you realize that you've got things like you've got more time, you kind of do all these new things that you might not have necessarily done, which opens a whole load of new doors. You meet new friends, and then it kind of, you know, your life becomes a lot more enriched, I guess, from all the bad things.
That's really cool, because we also try to teach people about taking risks, and that's almost like that. It's like, yes, you didn't have time for them. It's not something that you would necessarily have ordinarily done. But just go give it a try, because no point's being stuck in a rut, is there? You might as well go out, and the world has got so many amazing things on offer, hasn't it?
Yeah, and just
try them.
Yeah.
And if you don't like them, don't do it again.
Yeah.
If you do like them.
It's hard though, isn't it? Because I so come back to that point where, you know, you hear the news, you know, whatever situation and the listeners are when they're, you know, when they're hearing this podcast. I think back to, you know, that pain is so great, and you talk about taking risk, but it does take a lot of courage to take risks, doesn't it? Because I think of my father. It reminds me of my father. When my mother died, he said to himself, lots of people are going to invite me out. I'm going to have lots of invitations, and I don't want to go. But if I say no to the first invitations, they'll probably never invite me again. So he said to himself, and he was a very shy man, quite quiet, he said to himself, I'm going to say yes to every first invitation, because then the second time they invite me, I can say no and I know they'll invite me back. And he said yes to every single invitation, and he said it was such a hard thing to do because he didn't have the courage to do it, but he made a pact with himself and he just did it. And then he slowly widened his social life, and he had people he could call upon, and he felt then he could say no later, but he would still be invited out. He hadn't shut the door to people coming into his life.
But again, that's a mindset thing, isn't it? So if we tell ourselves, no, I can't do that, then you can't. But the word can't shouldn't really exist, because just give it a try. We do have the power over our mind. It's just practicing that, I think, isn't it?
And clearly you're very courageous. I mean, clearly you're very strong. You have a sense of tenacity about you. You're going to see a solution. I can see you're a solution person. The courage you must have had at that time, and still now, because you're still raw now. It doesn't end, does it?
No, definitely. It gets better, but it doesn't. I don't know if not end's the right word, but it's still there.
It's part of who you are now, isn't it? It's part of your story.
And do you think it's a different case scenario when your husband comes to you to say he's having a relationship with another man as opposed to another woman? Does that affect self-esteem in a different way, do you think?
Well, in my head, I was like, I kind of am like, Oh, well, there's nothing I could have done, really. Like, I mean, I can't compete with that because that is just not my, well...
I'm not a man.
Makeup, you know? I'm not a man, yeah, basically. But also, I guess, the other side was, it upset me more because I think if he'd gone home with another woman, everyone would probably be like, what the hell are you doing? Like, how have you done this? Glad that it was a man, I guess you could say. But also, I guess it takes away from my hurt a bit because it's almost like he had such a huge thing going on that it kind of, my hurt was a bit irrelevant because that's so much more major than that. And
no, I know what you mean. And as humans, you know, you were dealing with an incredible amount of hurt. Yeah, I can see what you're saying because you have the same friendship groups. Your parents are all intertwined. You could see all of their worry for him. Yeah. And you wanted to just scream out loud, why isn't it about me? But we don't really want to do that as humans, do we? Because we don't really want it, and we don't want... That seems a little bit conceited as well, doesn't it? But you just want your pain to be taken really seriously at that moment.
Yeah. That's a good way of putting it, yeah.
And at the end of the relationship, there's so many losses. There's the loss of the future that you'd hoped to have. There's the loss of the 10-year-old boy that you knew all those years ago. For you, more so than probably most people. There's loss of the dreams as well. So where are you at right now in your life? You're obviously here on holiday, going back to England. Yeah. And you're going back to supportive friends. Are you still flying?
Yeah, so I've still cabin crew, so that's going really well. I've actually just started studying, so I'm just started doing a law degree.
Congratulations.
So that's quite exciting.
Change in career.
Yeah, so I'm going to study and work at the same time to just see how, like, to kind of finish the degree, and then afterwards I'll look at maybe doing something else.
So can you do some part-time work while you're studying as well?
So I'm actually going to work full-time and then I can study part-time, so it works out really well. Just because of the way my roster works, I don't work that much, so I tend to have a lot of free time.
And what's inspired you to go into law?
I have always kind of been interested in it, and I've always said that I'd wanted to do it, and then just when I kind of, you know, had all these eye-opening things happen to me, I thought I wanted to try something new. I want to learn something new. I want to really, like, use my brain and kind of, just...
And have you got your eye on a specialist area of law to go into?
Well, not yet, because I've kind of been looking at it. I don't necessarily know if I want to go into a law-related job, or if I was looking kind of maybe in the HR kind of alleyway, so we'll see.
Exciting. It's nice to start using your brain again, isn't it? Have a change of career.
Yeah.
We've had a change of career quite recently, haven't we?
Absolutely. And I think Jess's message is great because she's doing things for herself. You know, you're doing things for yourself.
Oh, yeah.
You're progressing you, working on you, putting one foot in front of the other, still building your life, and you haven't let it hold you back. You've allowed yourself to feel the pain, you've allowed yourself to heal. Yeah. And I know it's still a journey. It doesn't necessarily, it's not, oh great, I'm healed, because that's not how life is. You still may get hurt in the future by him and what he's done. And the hurt may come up here and there, but you are healing, you're on that journey, and you've got such an amazing outlook. You never let it stop you, if you know what I mean. Like, some people will live in anger, hurt, bitterness, resentment, and they will stay there. And we all know people who have split up 20 years ago, and that's where they still are. Whereas this life is so beautiful and worth living. And you do that all the time.
Yeah. And it's not all rosy though, is it? I mean, on that journey of recovery for listeners, you know, we're talking to you and you're obviously so courageous, level-headed, you're going in a new direction now, but actually that doesn't undermine the days that you sit there and think this is so hard. Everyone else is married and stayed married, everyone else is now having children. So for listeners, what would the message be about those days that are up and down?
I guess, as Jo was saying as well, do things for you, because at the end of the day, the only person who has to live with the decisions you make and the things you do is you, really, isn't it? I mean, don't worry about what other people think. It doesn't matter if you're worried about how your life looks to other people. Just get up and do things for yourself and know that at the end of the day, you're the one who has to deal with you. So as long as you're happy, it doesn't really matter.
Do you know, I wish I'd met Jess or heard this podcast before I went through what I went through, because I didn't know all the things that she's been speaking about today when I went through it. So
this is why we do our podcast.
I think you are incredibly brave. I think you're absolutely remarkable. And I think you're going to really touch lives for our listeners who are in desperate places, because when we're going through it, we don't necessarily have those tools. But yet we can listen to your story and say, gosh, she did this and she did this, and I can hang on to that. And she's given me the courage actually just to get out of bed in the morning.
Yeah, I hope so.
Thank you so much for coming onto our podcast today.
That's okay.
As I say, I wish I'd met you years ago before my own traumas kicked in, but the lessons are huge and you're a remarkable woman, and we just wish you good luck in your law studies, and we can't wait to follow up and hear where you're going.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jess. Thank you for sharing.
Thanks so much for being with us today. For us to inspire others to live their magnificently imperfect life, please subscribe and leave us a 5-star review on iTunes or on your podcast app. You can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Pods with Posh and Pool. We can't wait for you to join us on our next episode. Love, light and peace.